An all-American couple with everything to live for.
Both young, good-looking, bright.
She was like an angel. It shines through her. It shines through her eyes.
Then, on a summer night on a Florida beach,
the man was right on top of him before he even noticed the guy.
He's shot 4 times, and he's really bleeding.
Well, what was your emergency?
I think somebody's been shot.
Once I got to the straightaway, I could see her body at the end of the crossover.
Investigators soon uncover a web of lies and lovers.
He's like, I am having a sexual relationship with her.
And set their sights on a cold-blooded killer with a hidden agenda. Soundtrack for Murder. (2002). Justin and April Barber celebrate their 3rd wedding anniversary. After drinks and dinner, they stroll hand in hand on a moonlit Florida beach.
They walked over the walkover, down onto the beach, kicked their shoes off, and just walked south on the beach for maybe 15 or 20 minutes.
Suddenly, a man appears out of the darkness. He points a gun at the couple and demands cash.
The man was right on top of him before he even noticed the guy.
Justin struggles for the gun. Shots are fired. Justin blacks out. When he comes to, the gunman is gone, and so is April.
He ran south on the beach, he couldn't find his wife. He ran north on the beach, couldn't find his wife. And then ultimately he found her floating the surf and probably what he described to be a foot of water. She had sustained a gunshot wound. It was actually in her left cheek. He could see that there was blood and it was bleeding.
He couldn't pick her up, and he began to panic himself because he's shot 4 times and he's really bleeding.
Desperate, Justin drags his wife as far as he can, then struggles on alone. When he gets to the highway, he tries to flag down a passing car.
Since he couldn't get a car to stop, he got into his vehicle and he just started to drive.
He turned his forward flashers on so anybody and everybody could see him.
Bleeding badly and losing strength, he finally pulls alongside another car. The driver calls 911.
Well, what was your emergency?
I think somebody's been shot.
Excuse me?
I think somebody's been shot.
Okay, is he conscious at all?
Yeah, he's conscious, trying to keep him that way.
When sheriff's deputies arrive, they find 30-year-old Justin Barber behind the wheel of his SUV. Blood covers his front seat. He's barely conscious. He tells deputies he and his wife were shot, and his wife's still back at the beach.
His wife was somewhere on a walkway or a walkover to the beach, but he didn't know exactly where.
While a helicopter flies Justin to a trauma center in Jacksonville, sheriff's deputies rush back to the isolated stretch of beach where April and Justin were attacked.
We had approximately 28 miles of beach area to search and about 9 walkovers that needed to be searched.
Sergeant Tanner carefully starts his search at the northern beach access, wary the gunman may still be in the area.
Did a tactical approach down the walkway to through the dunes. It winds around a little bit. Once I got to the straightaway, I could see her body at the end of the crossover. I made my way down to her, checked her for a pulse, never got a pulse from her, and then I could look down on her chest a little bit and see if it was rising any. I didn't see any rise in her chest. I immediately notified dispatch. I took a defensive position out in the dunes itself.
Paramedics respond quickly, but are unable to save April. She is pronounced dead at 11 p.m. Officers cordon off the beach and begin their search.
We had our air unit out. It was checking the dune areas, checking the beach for any signs of footprints, evidence, suspect, anything that we could find. We also had canine dogs out to see if they could pick up a scent of anybody in case they had traveled further down the beach and the suspect was still on the beach.
Investigators find 2 pairs of shoes belonging to Justin and April. Marks visible in the sand indicate where Justin dragged April from the shoreline. A couple from Tennessee comes forward. They recall seeing 2 vehicles parked near the beach access entrance, an SUV and a smaller Dodge K-car.
They said they were northbound on A1A and that they were very attuned to seeing a car alongside the road because they didn't live anywhere near an ocean, and they thought, wow, wouldn't it be nice to be able just to pull your car over in the evening and be able to walk to the ocean.
A few minutes later, the couple grew alarmed when that same SUV sped past them with its emergency lights flashing.
When they got further up the road at a traffic light, that's where they found this 4-wheel drive vehicle. Stopped at the light, and there was a lot of commotion going on that people was attending to the driver who had said that he'd been shot and that his wife had also been shot and that she was on the beach somewhere, but he couldn't remember where.
The couple directed officers back to where they remembered seeing the parked vehicles. It's next to the same beach access walkover where April's body was found.
So the first thought is there must have been somebody in this K-car that went down and robbed these people.
Officers frantically search for the gunman. As investigators question other witnesses, forensic investigators with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement begin processing the crime scene.
April Barber's body was located at the end of the boardwalk. Her head was facing in a northerly direction, her feet were in a southerly direction.
Investigators locate tracks in the sand where Justin dragged his wife from the water's edge to the boardwalk.
Her legs were bent at the knees and kind of folded underneath her body, and her arms were extended out, straight out from the body. There was a wound in her left cheek on which blood was flowing from.
While investigators continue their search at the beach, Sheriff's Detective Howard Cole meets with Justin Barber at the hospital.
I spent several hours with him at the hospital. He was conscious, he was able to answer my questions, and he had what appeared to be 4 small caliber gunshot wounds. 1 wound to his left shoulder. He had 1 to his right shoulder, kind of like in the muscle that you use to shrug your shoulders. He had like a grazing wound in his right rib cage, and he had another small caliber wound right through this palm of his left hand.
Detective Cole questions Justin about the gunman.
Justin described the suspect as being taller than him, stronger than him, wearing a baggy t-shirt and a ball cap. He said he could not see his face because it was obviously dark out there.
Justin tells the detective that when he saw the pistol, he stepped between the gunman and his wife. There were shots. He was hit and passed out.
When he woke up, the guy was gone, his wife was gone, and he wasn't really quite sure what happened.
Justin says he was too weak from his own wounds to drag his wife all the way to their car. His only choice was to leave April and go for help.
I got him to give me a statement and also had him sign several permission to search forms.
As the sun comes up the next morning, detectives widen their search. Who would want to kill a beautiful young couple on their anniversary?
We don't have many murders. Very, very few. Justin and April sounded like the all-American couple. Both young, good-looking, bright. He was working for a company up in Jacksonville. He was on the fast track. She was working in a cancer clinic, but also pursuing an advanced degree.
As word of the murder spreads, investigators continue combing the crime scene, looking for clues.
We searched the dunes for any kind of casings or anything a suspect may have thrown, any blood evidence, anything we could find.
The search fails to turn up any evidence of the gunman or a murder weapon.
You could put a Volkswagen in the middle of those dunes and you might not find it. I mean, it is very dense. It was my suggestion that we burn all the brush out of there and look, but the state park wasn't going to have that.
With little to go on, investigators release a drawing of the suspect based on Justin's vague description. They get several calls about a transient who lives in the nearby dunes.
We spent, I believe it was almost a week trying to locate this transient. And we did locate him and was able to determine that he was not involved in the case.
Detectives also attempt to track down the K car witnesses reported seeing parked near the beach access.
That was quite extensive to deal with that suspicious lead.
We didn't have a tag number. We didn't have a reliable make. We didn't have a color. All we knew is that there was some sort of older model car allegedly parked in relation to the crime scene.
We never could verify that that K car was there.
Investigators turned their attention to the victims. Was this a random killing? Or was there someone in the lives of Justin and April Barber who wanted to harm them? Justin Barber and April Lott were born and raised in Oklahoma. They met in 1998 at a Halloween party. After a whirlwind romance, Justin proposed on Valentine's Day, 1999.
He seemed like a very nice guy. He seemed motivated. He seemed to truly care for April.
The couple married in August 1999 in a small ceremony on the beach in the Bahamas. Soon after, April's mother passed away, and newlyweds took April's younger brother and sister into their home.
April had made a commitment to her mother that she would raise Julie and Kendon, and Justin was willing to do that. And I think that she saw that in Justin and was one of the things that really attracted her to Justin.
It was hard on them to be newlyweds and raise a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old. Justin had treated us, like we were his own kids, and Kendon looked up to Justin a lot like a big brother or even a dad.
A year later, the couple faced a new challenge when Justin's company transferred him to Jacksonville, Florida, and April took a job in Thomasville, Georgia.
According to Justin, it was a very happy, very normal marriage. The fact that they were apart really was just because of work, had no bearing on the relationship, good or bad.
Investigators questioned friends and family about the couple.
Justin is someone that I think that he wanted to do good in life, and he took pride in himself, and he challenged himself to be the best that he could be. He proved that when he excelled in his MBA program at Oklahoma. April was somebody that we got to know that had an absolute heart of gold. She was like an angel. You can see that in any pictures. It shines through her. It shines through her eyes. I mean, her whole heart is there. I believe it was her mother that had died of cancer, and that's what she dedicated her life to, was the cancer research and working in the cancer field.
Investigators ask if they can search his condo. He readily agrees.
By all accounts, looking, it was a very normal residence. What was unusual is the fact that his wife wasn't actually living with him. So she basically had like an overnight bag in the house, and everything else appeared to be his.
Detectives do make one surprising discovery.
We found 2 life insurance policies, one on his life, one on her life, both for $2 million. So anytime you're dealing with a situation of this nature, that's definitely something you need to look at as a possible motive.
Investigators ask Justin about the policies. He tells them April paid the premiums. In fact, he believes she recently let the policies lapse. Then, Justin offers investigators a lead.
Justin had communicated to us that we needed to look into a doctor that she was having problems with in Thomasville, Georgia. Work-related, kind of inappropriate comments, sexual harassment sort of thing.
But what investigators find in Georgia sends them down a different path. Was April secretly planning a new life? And who else knew about the couple's multi-million-dollar insurance policies? As the investigation continues into the murder of April Barber, detectives travel to Thomasville, Georgia. According to her husband, Justin, one of April's co-workers was sexually harassing her.
Detective Cole went up to Georgia and met with the local law enforcement up there, and explored that possibility that there was someone up there that had done something to her and had followed her down here.
Her boss was like, yeah, I'm familiar with the situation. I spoke to him. It's not a problem. It hadn't been a problem. And furthermore, Justin knew what this particular doctor looked like, had met him, and he certainly wasn't saying that doctor had confronted him on the beach.
While in Thomasville, detectives search April's apartment. Some real estate magazines they find pique their interest.
The week prior to her death, she was looking for property to buy in Oklahoma.
When investigators question April's family and friends, they discover Justin and April's marriage was in trouble.
April had gone home the week before and said, hey, Justin's playing tennis with this girl. She knew in her heart that there was something to it.
In Florida, investigators tracked down Justin's tennis partner. Shannon Kennedy admits she started dating Justin just weeks before April was killed.
She's very honest. She's like, listen, I met him through work. We started a social relationship. You know, we'd go out for happy hour, and it progressed into a sexual relationship.
Investigators are growing suspicious. They've caught Justin in one lie, and other parts of his story are beginning to unravel. Justin had told police he'd dragged April as far as he could after he was shot and bleeding. But when DNA test results came back on April's pants, there's no sign anywhere of Justin's blood.
He's got a bleeding hand, which, you know, is very vascular, would bleed a lot. He's touching his car door, he's touching his steering wheel, he's transferring blood there, but yet he describes dragging his wife by the front of her pants for 100 feet, and there's not a stitch of blood on her pants.
Investigators re-interview Justin, digging for answers.
We asked Justin to go out to the beach and do a walkthrough of the crime scene.
By having him walk through it, it gave us a better understanding of what he actually had to say.
It was important to get him out there, you know, and have him walk through step by step on video what occurred, and then ultimately compare that to the physical evidence and see how it measured up.
We really stopped talking. We started talking all the time, but started going back. She was on my right hand. Yeah, she was water than I was.
Justin sticks to his story. He and April were walking along the beach when the gunman confronted them.
He said the man was holding up a gun. He believes he heard cash. Another point, he said maybe he thought he heard keys. She said something, and then the assailant focused his attention on April, and he took the gun from pointing it at Justin and was pointing at her. At which point Justin said that he lunged at the assailant's arm and a struggle ensued. He heard one shot and then passed out.
When he awoke, he found April in the surf. She was unconscious and her face was bleeding. He tried everything to get her to the car.
He described trying to cradle carry her. He described a fireman's carry. He described trying to drag her by her arms, drag her by her elbows, drag her by her pants, and in between which time he said he had dropped her numerous times. He said he got her as far as the foot of the boardwalk.
As Justin relives the night of April's murder, investigators are struck by his lack of emotion.
He acted like he kept wanting to cry, but there was no tears at all when he went through everything that happened.
That's like investigations 101. I mean, emotion, real emotion is very obvious as opposed to, you know, fake or staged emotion. He just didn't seem genuine in what he was saying.
Deputies ask Justin for a written statement of everything he remembers.
I don't know if I'm dealing with a robbery and I have a witness or if I'm dealing with the suspect. So the goal is you got to maintain a delicate balance between getting what you need and keeping that person cooperating with you.
With Justin's affidavit in hand, Detective Cole confronts him about his affair with Shannon Kennedy.
I said, are you or are you not having a sexual relationship with her? No, absolutely not.
Detective Cole is ready for Justin's lie.
I said, well, Justin, I do have Shannon Kennedy in the next interview room. If I need to, I will bring her in here and we will get to the bottom of this. So I get up to start walking out of the room. He's like, no, let's not do that. I am having a sexual relationship with her. I'm talking to this guy about the murder of his wife, trying to figure out who did it, and this man's lying to me.
Detectives try putting pressure on Justin. They show him pictures of April's dead body.
Innocent people will only put up with so much of your crap, so to speak. An innocent person at some point is going to say, listen, all due respect, I understand you got a job to do, but you're wasting your time focusing on me. On the other hand, where somebody who's guilty or is involved will sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there, and that's just not human nature.
Despite their suspicions, investigators don't have enough evidence to hold Justin. Then, as Justin prepares to leave, he stuns Detective Cole with an odd question about Shannon Kennedy.
He asked if she was still there, and I said, yeah. He's like, well, ask her if she'll give me a ride home. And I'm like, is he really asking me if his girlfriend is going to give him a ride home right after his wife's murder?
It's not only the investigators who are suspicious.
We never heard from him, and so him just disappearing like that made me change my mind about, because some people already suspected him the day of the funeral. And I didn't start suspecting him until a month after. He didn't call to check on us. He didn't return phone calls. He just disappeared.
Without a confession or any physical evidence, investigators decide to try a new approach.
My feelings at that point was we had to get his computer.
As Justin consents to a computer search, investigators discover pieces of the puzzle that are finally snapping into place. Investigators now believe Justin Barber murdered his wife, but they don't have physical evidence to prove it. They ask Justin if they can examine his computer. He consents.
Nowadays, everybody does everything on their computers, so it was our intention to take his computer and see what Justin was doing on it.
We felt that he did a lot of planning, and by being able to get his computer with the feeling that he lived on his computer and did everything on his computer, that might uncover some of the evidence, linking him more to the crime.
Investigators send the computer to Chris Hendry, a criminal laboratory analyst with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Detective Skip Cole requested analysis to find out if there was anything of potential value for their case. He submitted it. I ran some keyword searches that he had, which is about 40 or 50 of them.
On Justin's computer, Hendry finds searches for gunshot wounds, murder, drowning, and Guana State Park.
We found stuff about crime scenes, about life insurance policies, homicide, extradition to Brazil, how much blood to be found, but no body, but pronounced dead.
The results confirm all of the investigators' suspicions, but Hendry has bad news. He can't determine for certain whether the searches were made before or after April's death. The evidence will never stand up in court.
We believe that it's very deliberate research, but not having the date, you can't say it. So it was very frustrating.
The searches also reveal something else. Justin might have been planning to stage his own death.
So we're thinking, oh man, he's getting worried that we're getting close, and he's gonna throw some blood down and disappear, and hopefully that we presume that he's dead and he's off in Mexico or Brazil or wherever.
Investigators re-examine their case, looking for new leads, new directions, anything they might have missed.
The evidence in this case basically was a body, which was very extensively documented. In this case, the photographs of the body and how the victim was found ultimately became the cornerstone of the case.
The autopsy shows April died as a result of a single gunshot wound to the left cheek. The bullet lodged in between her first and second vertebra, paralyzing her almost instantly. But crime scene photographs show a thick foam coming from April's mouth, indicating she was starting to drown before she was shot.
If it would have happened as Justin presented it, she would have been shot and immediately incapacitated. Therefore, she couldn't have taken any breaths. If you do not take any breaths in the water, that foam simply cannot form.
Another red flag is April's left hand.
The diamond ring was a family heirloom, and it was real and very expensive. Certainly, if you were going to rob somebody, something you would consider taking.
Investigators also doubt other elements of Justin's story.
For him to wake up see that the assailant's gone and April's gone, to look up and down the beach and ultimately find her in the surf is almost an admission as to him putting her there. Because furthermore, why would you think that she was in the water? Why wouldn't you think that she ran up in the dunes to hide? Why wouldn't you think she went back to the car? I mean, you would never look in a 2 foot of water to find her. So we thought, how in the hell did he find her in the water? Why would he find her in the water? I mean, if you went down to that beach on a night like this, you wouldn't see in that water. The fact that he didn't bring his cell phone that night, but any other time he's getting in fights with his wife because his cell phone doesn't stop ringing and he refuses to leave it at home.
Justin claims he searched his SUV for April's cell phone, checking both the front and back seats.
And then, of course, her purse was in the car with a cell phone, which obviously was interesting to the investigation.
Justin says he then drove 10 miles north along Highway A1A before finally stopping at a red light. He would have passed a restaurant, a drugstore, a gas station, and several private homes.
You know, there's houses and there's stores or whatever, and, you know, granted, you know, he was going to get help, but he passed a lot of open things that he could have gotten help.
Investigators are convinced Justin Barber killed his wife.
It was not an easy case to prove, but we knew that we had our target. We put everything together that we had at the time, and we met with the state attorney's office and presented it to him.
But in a move that shocks investigators, the state attorney's office refuses to prosecute. They argue that all the evidence is circumstantial and that proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt will require more than a motive and the means.
There was frustration there. And from an investigator's point of view, you have to meet the burden of probable cause. But from a prosecutor's point of view, their burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. Two entirely different things.
They wanted us to go back and reenact the case and see, you know, if there was anything there that we weren't seeing that he would be able to help us out with.
When investigators head back to the beach where April was killed, they discover what was in front of them the whole time. Indisputable evidence hidden in plain sight. When the state attorney's office refuses to press charges against Justin Barber, investigators are frustrated, but more determined than ever. They're convinced Justin is guilty. Now they need to dig even deeper to prove it.
I think the police knew that it was going to have to be a circumstantial case because that is a deserted beach. The opportunity for witnesses was almost non-existent. There are homes nearby, but no homes in that area.
I was very disappointed and very naive at the time as to the inner workings between a sheriff's office and a state attorney's office, and thinking that this would move very quickly.
For the investigators, nothing about Justin's story is making sense.
We had some issues with the wounds that Justin had and whether or not they were really consistent with the way he said it happened.
The gunshot wounds were odd from the onset, just due to their angle and trajectory. I mean, they were all kind of out and away from center mass.
So we had to research and find a gunshot expert, and to have them brought in and examine the injuries.
The expert confirms the detective's suspicions.
He felt that the gunshots to Justin were self-inflicted.
A forensic accountant is brought in to audit Justin's finances.
They were able to really recreate the finances for the previous year, maybe 18 months. And the biggest thing was $58,000, give or take, in credit card debt that was accumulated in that short period of time, when not only he was doing that, he was losing the money to E-Trade. He was taking cash advances on the credit cards to cover margin calls. And this is all from a guy that's got a master's in business and finance.
Then, investigators discover April's $2 million life insurance policy had not lapsed, as they previously thought.
We talked to the insurance agent in this case, and he remembered it very specifically. He only met with Justin. He never ever even met April. Anything that was done by April was done via mail. She never personally went and met with the agent. And it was for $2 million on his life and $2 million on her life.
Even though Justin hadn't claimed the money, detectives view the policy as a strong motive for murder. Detectives next hire a medical examiner to take a fresh look at the physical evidence. He discovers a critical clue the investigators have missed.
But once it was pointed out, everybody was like, bam.
Justin claims to have both dragged and carried April Barber from the surf to the boardwalk. Her limp body would have fallen into a variety of positions.
We know that he, to his own admission, said that she flopped every which way. So therefore, the blood flow would have been every which way.
In fact, the autopsy photos show all the blood from her wound flowed in just one direction.
It's like the teacup theory. I mean, basically, to believe what he said, you would have had to hold her head perfectly in that position all the way up the beach.
7 months after April's murder, court papers are filed in the battle over April's estate. Justin is trying to collect on April's life insurance. As part of the process, he has to provide a videotaped deposition. He admits to having numerous affairs.
Did you have a sexual relationship with another woman in Georgia while you were married to April Barber?
Yes.
And did you have sexual relations with a woman in New Zealand?
Yes.
Did you tell April Barber that you ever had sexual activity with Shannon Kennedy?
No.
Did you tell April, did you lie to her about what your relationship was?
Yes.
I thought he seemed very forced, very rehearsed. I left with a even stronger sense that Justin did this.
Detective Cole is struck by Justin's apparent loss of memory.
Now, some of the biggest things that stand out in my mind about that video is not only just how arrogant and how brash he comes across, but just things that he can't recall. The last conversation he had with his wife at dinner. I mean, come on, that's the last word she spoke. What did you talk about? I don't recall.
I don't recall.
What'd y'all do before you went out? What'd you talk about? I don't recall.
I don't recall.
I mean, come on, that's your wife's last words. It doesn't make sense.
In the summer of 2004, nearly 2 years after April's murder, investigators meet once again with the state's attorney's office.
The state attorney's office was weighing the evidence and very much involved with the results of the forensics and the blood evidence and the computer evidence and the financial evidence, and they were shoulder to shoulder with us reviewing it.
This time, the decision is to prosecute. On July 9th, 2004, a grand jury is convened. Justin Barber arrives to testify, sporting a new look.
Justin went in and he came out. He was the last witness, and he was indicted within about 14 minutes of that. And I arrested him right there in the courthouse.
I was relieved, because he killed my sister. He's out just living a normal life out in Oregon, with his new girlfriend, and, it wasn't fair.
It surprised me when I was told it took minutes for the grand jury to come back and indict him. It surprised me that he came back and testified. Justin thought he had outwitted everybody.
In the spring of 2006, just weeks before Justin's scheduled trial, computer expert Chris Hendry contacts prosecutors. He tells them new technology confirms that several of Justin's suspicious searches were made prior to April's death.
We found gunshot wound trauma to the chest, gunshot wound trauma right chest.
And there's something else.
And there was also a song that he had downloaded onto his computer. And I forget the exact time, but it was within minutes of him and April leaving that night to go out and eat dinner. He had downloaded the song, I used to love her, but I had to kill her.
I used to love her, but I had to kill her. And it goes on to describing, which is killing your spouse and burying her in the backyard, and you can still hear her complaint. I don't really believe in coincidences. I believe that song was deliberately downloaded, knowing the state of mind he was in at the time.
On June 12th, 2006, nearly 4 years after his wife's murder, Justin Barber's trial begins.
Justin Barber is accused of the crime of first-degree murder with a firearm. The defendant, Justin Barber, has entered a plea of not guilty.
Detective Cole had pretty much gotten all of his evidence together. There was never a doubt in his mind. I feel like that he was very sure that they had the evidence that was needed to convict Justin.
It was very stressful. Not just because it's a murder trial. I mean, obviously every murder trial is very stressful, but I mean, just there was a lot at stake.
I think that it hinges on both sides. I think it hinges on two things. For the prosecution, that defined blood pattern on her cheek seems to be a defining moment for the prosecution. For the defense, how do you shoot yourself 4 times?
Dr. Gerald Finley testifies for the prosecution regarding the blood flow evidence.
I compared the physical evidence that I found in these various reports and photographs and found 5 major, what I consider major inconsistencies.
And what are those?
One would be the blood flow on the face. The blood flow on her face is coming straight down. If the body had been moved that many times, the head would have changed positions, at which time the blood flow would have changed positions.
The blood pattern on her cheek would have been spread all over her face if she had been. He said he had to lay her down and pick her up 9 times. It just didn't make sense. It still doesn't.
The murder weapon is never found, but prosecutors have a theory.
He had 10 miles to discard the weapon, and truthfully, as much as this was planned, there's no doubt that he had a specific plan for the weapon, so you know, he did a good job of disposing it. But there is extensive dunes and brush and palmettos that go for a while on both sides of the road north. So truthfully, even if you tossed it, I mean, and it fell just right, you might not find it, you know. So it was disappointing, but we just couldn't come up with it.
The defense claims there is no evidence linking Justin to the murder. They argue, in fact, that he almost died fighting to protect his wife.
There's no evidence of a gun in this case. The gun was not recovered in this case. There is no evidence whatsoever, that this defendant ever owned such a gun or possessed such a gun or had anything to do with such a gun. There is no evidence that he fired a firearm that evening. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, there is literally no evidence in this record to suggest or support the idea that he shot himself 4 times.
The prosecution lays out what it believes happened between Justin and April.
Well, the evidence suggests that basically he was confronted a couple weeks prior that she was going to leave him, and he just wasn't going to let that happen. I mean, he's a very controlling person, and this whole situation was going to end up on his terms. So on this particular night, I think he took her down to that beach, I mean, with obviously the sole intent of murdering her.
They were down on the beach. They took their shoes off at the boardwalk, walked down by the ocean. He was waiting for the opportunity and the nerve to finally grab her.
He obviously had a gun on him. He had baggy cargo pants on with big pockets, and we're talking about a very small gun. He pulled it out. She probably wasn't going to stand there and allow herself to be victimized. Somehow, they ended up in the water. He held her down in the water.
I think he held her underneath the water. I think he drowned her. I think he thought that she was dead, that he drug her up from the beach, brought her up to the boardwalk, shot her first, shot himself.
I think that at that point he felt that he might have hurt himself, and then I think some panic set in. He left her there.
And all of a sudden he's shot 4 times and he's really bleeding. And he thinks, oh my God, I might die. And he ran to his car, got into his car, turned his forward flashers on so anybody and everybody could see him, and tried to get as quick as he could to the hospital, which was up A1A North in Jacks Beach. And I think that when he stopped at the traffic light, where he ended up making contact with people in the car beside him, I think at that point he felt like he was bleeding so much that he might bleed to death, and he wanted to get somebody and get some help right then and there.
Why did he have this plan? And the argument's very clear when you start to look at the reasons why he committed it. He didn't just want to evade a prosecution. He wanted that for sure. And he wanted the $2 million, and he wanted sympathy for being shot, and he wanted to look like a hero who tried to save his wife. He wanted it all.
The trial creates mixed emotions for April's family.
Some parts of me, my heart went out to him, and then some parts I just couldn't stand him.
The trial ends on June 27th. The jury takes just 4 days to come back with its verdict.
Okay, I have examined the verdict, and the verdict is in proper form. All right, Mr. Barber, would you please rise for the verdict? Madam Clerk, please publish the verdict.
With a jury, find the defendant, Justice Murders Barber, as follows. Guilty of first-degree premeditated murder as charged in the indictment.
Just such relief that April had finally gotten justice. Just such a relief that it was over, and that 12 jurors that knew nothing about us and nothing about Justin's family listened to the evidence and believed that he was guilty.
I was relieved because we had waited 4 years for that.
The prosecution asks for, and the jury recommends, Justin Barber be put to death for murdering his wife April. The judge sets aside the death penalty and sentences Barber to life without the possibility of parole.
I felt good about our jury system, that good people could see, even though we did not have a confession, we did not have the murder weapon, they could still see, what someone can do.
I think the investigators and all the experts, I think they did a good job, especially Detective Cole. He's worked on it from day one. He put his heart into it, and he really did a good job.
It's a very emotional thing when you spend 4 years, you get to know the family. Just the gravity of the situation. I mean, it was pretty overwhelming and just very satisfying, and renews your faith in the system.